one of the things that people've got to understand is this. And I can't make it real to people. I can tell them that, our national parks are pledged as collateral for all the nations that basically lent us money. The Bible says that the borrower is servant to the lender. I don't know that most people would understand it, but there are literally nations who can send their militaries in and claim what's rightfully theirs under basically the international commerce protocols, and two of our presidents gave them that ability. That was never the case before. So, being on talk radio, Doug, a number of years ago, somebody on the West Coast who was listening to us from one of the West Coast ports up in the Seattle, Bellingham area, we're talking about they were watching Chinese ships, loads of soldiers. And the guy was on the docks. He was kind of a manager of a bunch of freights and stuff. And he said, look, they're coming in. And he said, Steve, these men were so disciplined. And he said they had state-of-the-art. The guy was former military, weapons and everything. And when he asked about it, here's what he was told. They're here to collect what's theirs. Now, they haven't collected what's theirs, but they own it. It's just like having an absentee landowner. An absentee landowner. You may get to occupy the land and pay rent or anything, but you really don't know who owns it. And at some point, Doug and Joe, and this is what I think is critical for people to understand, is that when the trucks don't run, the store shelves aren't stocked. You know that the biggest corporation in the United States, one of the biggest that feeds America, obviously, is the Mart store, Walmart. And we've all heard the stories about the abandoned, the shut down Walmarts. We've seen the death of retail. And yet we see the internationalists, the globalists, the global elite, and everything is designed now to have a central store. It's almost like the Erie Canal, Doug. What was that song? 15 years on the Erie Canal? And the thing is that I owe my soul to the company store. What people don't recognize is that the king bees will only feed the worker bees enough to keep them alive, so that the king bees, and this is true across the history of the world, whether you're dealing with feudalism or you're dealing with, what we see now as what I'd call, and I'd call it aberrant. In other words, it's an aberration of capitalism. What we have right now is basically the motion to control everything under so few eyes, just like the media. What is it? 6 major corporations own all the media in this country. So, it's not only the fake news, them, it's the controlled news, them. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's the deal. Whether you understand the full effect of what we're talking about tonight, the people that have planned this stuff don't sleep in some part of the globe. Don't get me wrong, they have to sleep, unless, of course, the fallen ones orchestrating everything. But, there's a disconnect between the supernatural events taking place, whether it's weather, whether it's volcanism. And I want to make something very clear. When you start looking at the cubometric volume of ash going into the upper atmosphere and all the strange weather, it's got to be obvious to most people that, hey, this happened before in history in 1815 with Mount Tambora, and the following year they had no summer. And now we've got the most extreme geoengineered, as Dane Wigington, and I agree with him, events taking place on the planet, and people still are starting to say, well, there must be something to that chemtrailing. Where were you 20 years ago? So the point being is that everything that's designed. So, Bob, in a university town, Bozeman's a university town, and I just question everybody else who lives in a university town, what's going to happen when there's no food in the student union building or the student cafeteria? And for the record, the Federal Emergency Management Agency knows where literally every refrigerator in a local community is located. They've done surveys, and why would they do that? It's simple. In an extreme event, when it comes down, I even posted a story, other places you can look for food, when everybody's panicked. Most of those places that look for food, the only way that you'll get any food out of those places, abandoned, I want to add, is basically beat the other people to it. And it was astonishing to me, Bob, that people didn't understand why FEMA would be doing an inventory of all available food sources in every county and every town across the nation. You want to address that?
Yeah, well, it's obvious, Steve. They know what is coming. You know, I've had the phone calls from people in FEMA buying food from me, and I asked them, plain coy, why are you buying so much? And they said, I can't tell you. Well, I kept pressing, and then this one gentleman finally told me, well, I'll say this, when they go out, they will not come back on. That's what his response to me was. And this
make that statement one more time.
I had a call from a person in FEMA, a district manager in FEMA, and he wanted to buy a large quantity of food. And myself, I was playing coy, asking him, well, why do you want so much? What are you doing with this? And he told me, I can't tell you at first, but I pressed him, and he says, well, I'll tell you this. I'm buying it for my people, and when they go out, they will not come back on. And I presumed he was talking about the lights or electricity. He was scared.
For sure.
You know, Steve, I have known some people in the government. I've been friends with them and know them. And I can tell you, everyone, and Steve, I'm not saying this lightly. I'm just telling you, this is the truth. Everyone has told me it is over with. They are playing, one of the expressions was whack-a-mole. No matter what level of crime you deal with in America today, and we've all played that game, you beat one down, two pop up. You beat two down, five pop up. They are at that point right now where they cannot manage the crime that is happening in this country. It is so prolific that we are seeing the breakdown of law and order in this country. We are a nation. You know, one thing I learned in what I did for so many years is that you watch and look what people entertain themselves with, and that's what people will revert to when there's no one watching. In America, we are a pornography and violence-saturated society. When the rule of law breaks down, do you think we're going to take up knitting? No. I mean, that's what we're going to do, Steve. These people that fill their minds with violence and filth, that's what's going to happen. We have a day of reckoning coming. You know, I had John Lovell, the ranger, he told me, he goes, you know, it isn't what you have, it's what you can keep, what you can defend. You know, what is coming to this country is going to be a breakdown of civil law in such a manner that we are going to see just absolute anarchy in the streets. And that's why these people want to know where the food is at, because they know these things are coming. I mean, when I have people that are in pretty, I'd say, substantial positions in the government saying we're playing whack-a-mole, that's a sobering thought for them to say that. We can no longer manage the crime that is happening in this country, and that we are going after only the top of it, because there's so much of it we can't control it. We are a nation that has been taken over by lawlessness. And again, Steve, it's like you said, I don't think these words have meaning to 99% of people. Economic collapse. I mean, I just read that article, $21 trillion. Think of that. If that's true, if our government, outside of Congress, which is the only one can appropriate that money, if our government has printed and spent $21 trillion that they haven't told us about, what have they bought with that money? Who have they bribed? What bunkers have they built? And then that begs the other question. If they're willing to violate the law in such a manner and steal that much money from the American people, do you think it would bother them at all to pledge as collateral our water, our timber, any of our natural resources? Do you think the American people really own those anymore? Or do you think they're pledged as collateral for the debt and the underhanded dealings that we, American politicians, have against the American people?